Hello students, welcome to this session on epic in the series on literary terms. Students, epic is a very significant form of poetry, and whenever we talk about poetry or the forms of poetry, broadly speaking, there are two categories or two forms. One is lyrical and another is narrative. And as the name suggests, the lyrical form of poetry has its specificity in its being musical, and the narrative poetry is all about telling tales in verse. And when we talk about narrative poetry, we talk about ballad and we talk about epic, because both these forms of poetry tell tales in verse. Ballad we have already done in the previous session, and today we'll talk about epic. And now if we look at the origin of the word epic, we find that the origin of this very word tells a lot about this particular form of poetry. Etymologically, here student, I just want to make one thing clear to you, that etymology is a branch of study which is concerned about the origin of words. So etymologically, the word epic comes from the Latin word epicus, which itself comes from the ancient Greek word epos. So in a word we can say that this word epic has its origins in Greek word epos, and the literal meaning of Greek word epos is word, story or poem. So in this way, this very meaning of the word epos indicates that epic is something which is a story in poem, or a poem which tells a story. And it has been defined by various critics in their own way, but with the key concern on the chief characteristics of this form of verse, that is story and poem. Let's see what they say. In a glossary of literary terms, M.H. Abrams defines epic as a long narrative poem on a great and serious subject, related in an elevated style, centered on a heroic figure on whose actions depends the fate of a tribe, a nation, or the human race. And somewhat similar to this definition by M.H. Abrams, Herman and Holman write in a handbook to literature that epic is a long narrative poem in elevated style, presenting characters of high position in adventures, forming an organic whole through their relations to a central heroic figure, and through their development of episodes which are important to the history of a nation or race. So these two definitions makes it clear to us that an epic is a long narrative poem. Secondly, this poem it includes history. It talks about the history of a nation, the history of a tribe, the history of a race. So the themes are historical. Thirdly, this form of poetry is a work of art that blends the realism with the imaginary. Although this form of poetry is based on the historical themes, but it surpasses that historical realism. The poet, the creator of that epic, makes very extensive use of his own imagination to give a vivid picture of that very historical moment which is portrayed in a particular epic. Thirdly, epic is also defined as a book of tribe, the nation, the human race, as we have seen in these two definitions, one by M.H. Abrams and Herman and Holman, that the epic deals with the theme at a wider scale. Collectively, a huge group is dealt with in the story, which is narrated through epic. And another important feature of epic which comes before us when we study these two definitions, which you have seen in the earlier slide, that the epic or this form of poetry deals with a record of the achievements of a legendary superhero. Means the epic hero is portrayed as a legendary superhero, a legendary figure, and as the theme is always based on some historical events, so these epics, there is always a nostalgia for past. And after the theme of the poem, the next comes the style. And as the theme is legendary, as the whole canvas of epic is very grand, it is concerned with a huge group, its style is also very grand. It's written in an elevated style, in a dignified language, an epic is written. And there are two types of epics. One is called primary epic and another is secondary epic. By primary epic, we mean the folk and the traditional epics, which were oral, which were word of mouth, which were not written by a single author. And thus, so many events or episodes were added to these very oral narratives. So they are called the traditional epics or the primary epics. And the second one is the secondary epic, which are the written text, and they are also called the literary epics, which are still being read a lot. And you are all familiar with Milton's Paradise Lost. It's a famous example of literary epic. And there is one more term which is in use, that is mock epic. Actually, mock epic is not has any direct concern with this very form of epic which we have just discussed. It is an associate form of epic, and it is a parody of the epic which we have discussed. Mock epic parodies the epic form by employing exalted style for trifling subjects. As you have seen that in the epic, the subject is also legendary or exalted or the grand, and the style is also grand. But in the mock epic, what happens? The subject is very trifling, very insignificant subject is portrayed in an exalted style of an epic, is presented in a grand style. And these very mock epics are also generally written in heroic couplets, and one of the famous examples of mock epic is Pope's The Rape of the Lock. Students, mock epic is just a parody of the epic form of poetry. And as far as the notable examples of epic poetry in English literature are concerned, in terms of traditional epics and literary epics, they are the very famous one or the oldest literary work in English, that is Anglo-Saxon epic Beowulf. Then there are famous epics by Greek and Roman poets. You are all familiar with Homer's epics Iliad and Odyssey. Then there is another famous Roman poet Virgil, his epic the Aeneid. And then the famous English epic written by Milton, that is Paradise Lost. And lastly, the very familiar one with all of us are the Indian epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. So when we look at all these epics, if all of you are familiar with the story of Ramayana, and Mahabharata. Some of them must be familiar with Paradise Lost or Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. So all these epics, they truly indicate, they bear witness to this very fact that really the epics are very long narrative poems. Now, Homer's epics, Iliad and Odyssey, they are written in 24 books. Each epic is written in 24 books. Milton's Paradise Lost is divided into 12 books, and then Ramayana is there. You all know it is divided into 7 kandas, 7 cantos. So all these epics are very long narrative poems. And now we will just an overview of the general features or the chief characteristics of epic as a literary form. So every epic, if we look at Ramayana, if we look at Iliad or Odyssey, they are centered around an epic hero. And this epic hero is presented as larger than a normal human being. This hero is a figure of great national or even cosmic importance. In Iliad, Homer's Iliad, the Greek warrior Achilles is there. In Paradise Lost, Adam is there. He represents the entire human race. And in Ramayana, Lord Rama is there. So the epic hero's life is portrayed larger than the life of a normal human being. And as the hero or the central character is presented as a superhuman being, so the setting of the poem is also ample in scale. It may be worldwide or it even larger. As most of you must be familiar with Paradise Lost, the scope or the setting of the Paradise Lost is cosmic. Whole of the universe is the setting, for it takes place on earth, in heaven and in the hell. So the setting of the epic poems is very wide, big, huge. And the action, as the hero is the superhero, so the action, the chief action, episode of the epic involves the superhuman deeds or the superhuman actions. And these actions, they involve superhuman deeds in battles, etc. And in these great actions, the gods or other supernatural beings also take an interest. They also take an active part. And almost every epic opens with a proposition, with an invocation to the muses, just as to justify the creation of this grand story in a grand style. And after the invocation to the muses, almost all the epics which are being read and which are there in English literature, they open in media res, means in the middle of the things. The story begins at a critical point in the action. They are not written in the style that once upon a time there was a king. They just begin in the middle of the things. Then the narration, as I have already mentioned, that the grand themes are treated or expressed in a grand language, in a grand style. So an epic poem is a ceremonial performance and is narrated in a ceremonial style, which is deliberately distanced from ordinary speech. Milton's grand style is a famous example that how he has used the Latin diction in his poems. He has used stylized syntax and the wide-ranging allusions in Paradise Lost. And another things which come into the category of the ceremonial style is the use of Homeric similes. The Homeric similes are also called epic similes or the long-tailed similes. Students, you all familiar with simile? That simile is a statement of likeness when two things of different nature are compared and there is one point of likeness is there. But in the Homeric simile, what happens? That simile or this comparison or this statement of likeness is not limited to one phrase or one sentence. They are explained or described in 10 to 20 lines, and sometimes a single simile goes up to 2 pages in the epic. And along with Homeric similes, very lengthy adjectives, the recurrent epithets or the Homeric epithets are also used in epic poems. And as the epic is something related with grand story, expressed in grand style, so the epic spirit is now used in an extended sense also. Nowadays in literature, epic spirit is meant to be grand and sublime in style and scope and in the profound human importance of the subject matter of a particular text. So in this broadest sense, in the sense of the being epic, being grand in style, being sublime in scope. Dante's Divine Comedy is also categorized as an epic. Spenser's Fairy Queen is also categorized as an epic, and even the prose works on the basis of that very grand style and scope. These novels, Melville's Moby Dick and Russian writer Leo Tolstoy's famous work War and Peace, they are also called epic. So just on the basis of the grand style being presented in a presenting a grand theme, that is now used in an extended form in the prose and other works also. And in common uses also we see that the word epic is used with something very huge, something big, something grand, something splendid. So this is all about this grand form of poetry. Thank you.